What's the best part about being a writer?
I think the best part is being able to set my own hours. At this point, I've been writing for 11 years, so at this point we just have one child left in the nest, and he's 15. But all of these years that I've been writing, I can go anywhere I want to go during the day and write till 2 a.m. if that's what I need to do to catch up, and I love that part. The second part is the attention issue that creative people have. See, I now have an excuse. I actually get paid to not be paying attention because I'm working on a novel in my mind, so it works for me.
Okay, so that's the excuse you use when, say, your husband's talking to you and you didn't hear anything he said.
Yes.
You could say, oh, I was writing a novel.
There you go,
That's
and it works much better.
That is an excellent excuse. What's the worst part about being a writer?
The worst part is you can set your own hours. And you don't until you're under deadline, and you have 2 months to get a full novel written, and you know that you've wasted too much of your own time. So
How long does it usually take you to write a novel?
it takes me about 5 or 6 months, and that isn't always including all the research. So I take a little bit longer than some of the other writers who are getting out 2 in a year, and so far that's worked for me because the reader feedback is there's a depth of characterization and a depth of who they are that readers are connecting with, and they really care. They feel like they were that character.
If you're doing all this research, it seems like you should be writing your next novel about someone in the Bahamas. Really, doesn't that seem like a better than somebody really?
I'll run that by my editor and
see how it goes.
Yes.
If Bahaman fiction can't become really popular.
Or there are Amish in on the beach in Florida. That would help a little.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. In the winter. Only. In the summer, it's too hot. To
That's
do that
true.
Kind of research.
In wintertime. Okay.
What's the best writing job you've had? You've probably written other things besides just this. So what are some other things that you've written that you really enjoyed?
Since this, I've only written 5 books. I've really enjoyed every single one of them. I'm sorry, I'm no help on that.
Okay.
I think
you weren't a copywriter in another life.
No.
And hated
No.
describing the object.
I started writing as a hobby 11 years ago, and the characters stayed in my head and wouldn't shut up. And that's when I moved into, maybe I want to go to conferences and really learn how to write, and at least write this hobby well if I never aim for getting published.
Now, that's an interesting aspect of writers. When they have voices in their head, they write them down. Other people go to therapy. But for writers, it's
That
the
is
beginning of a
therapy.
career.
Yes,
Right, yeah.
yes.
All right. What's the worst job you've had that was great preparation for being a writer? What job do you think I'm so much happier doing this than if I'd had to stay doing that?
Oh, wow, that's a hard one. I'll tell you the hardest job I've had, it was a season. I was a homeschooling mom, and I had 2 middle schoolers and a toddler. And it was just running all day long, trying to get the meals and the snacks and make sure they're educated because they were going to go to public school later, and there wasn't anyone to blame but mom, and make sure that this toddler who had a few issues gaining weight was getting everything he needed and just going like crazy. But when I went to write Amish, that worked for me. It helped me because they allow God to dictate how many children they will have. And so they may have 10, 12 children, and they are moving all day long trying to make sure those children are fed and they have their snacks and they're getting their homework done, they're getting the garden in, they're reaping. So just that super busy time, had a good influence when it came time to write.
It's almost like being in the military, really, just sticking to a schedule, doing work.
and not wanting to get in that vehicle and drive somewhere because you're so tired. Like, okay, if I ever sit,
I'm gonna fall asleep. What would you do if you weren't a writer? What's your fallback career that you sometimes, when you're having a difficulty with a deadline, think about?
I love teaching, and I would teach probably elementary or middle school. And now at this point, if I had not been a writer, at this point I would love teaching high school writing. But if I had never been a writer, I would have aimed for, I love working with kids and seeing them learn to love to read. And so that has been something I've done as a volunteer throughout the years, is to help other kids who are falling through the cracks get a hold of reading and how, because nothing is more fun than a great book.
What genre haven't you written that you'd like to try? What's something that just you've got another kind of novel that you'd like to work on?
I would like to put a novel in a fishing town setting, contemporary, and make that work.
Are you a big fishing fan, or you just like the smell of
I
the
like
sea?
the smell of it, and my husband and I have traveled along those paths a little, and it just calls to me. I mean, stories are just going wild. I'm going, no, that's not what I'm doing right now. Maybe later.
Okay. Who's your biggest influence when you sit down to write? Who do you think of, like at your best, you're writing like, or you want to write like?
I don't know that I sit down and write with someone else's thoughts, someone else's voice. I think when I sit down to write, I want to dig in and find the insights that are in the work I'm working on. I mean, I enjoy reading all sorts of different books, but when I sit down to write, I don't think of how someone else does it.
Okay. What's your secret vice of an author or a genre? What would it surprise people that you read?
Well, it might surprise people that I used to read Danielle Steele.
Used to read?
I used to. It has been many years since I have read one of her books, but it was just, I could hear her voice from the moment you read one sentence. And at one point in my life, I could pass through the living room doing something, and if the TV were on and there were one of her movies, I would know just from hearing the cadence of the movie for just a moment. So there was something in there that...
What made you go away from Danielle Steele?
Part of it was just busyness. Part of it was there were times when you would pick up that book and you weren't quite sure it was labeled corn when you got into it. You go, oh, that wasn't what I was wanting to read. So.
All right. Well, I thank you very much for stopping by and talking to us today. And again, that's Cindy Woodsmall, The Hope of Refuge, and it is available at like every bookstore that I've been past in the past couple of weeks. So thank you very much.
Thank you.